Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Knife Guy. So what are we talking about today? So I've talked about this, I think, like a little bit here and there. It's sort of sprinkled throughout my content. I don't think I've actually got a dedicated video on this topic. And if I do, well, we're going to cover it again, because I don't know if my thoughts are exactly the same. But everybody experiences this. Anybody who has a pocket knife has had their first pocket knife. And that is a big deal. That kind of sets the stage, right, for everything. Some people get one knife and then they just use that knife and that's it. A lot of us, we think back to our first knife. This one, if you don't know, is my first pocket knife. This was originally my grandpa's pocket knife, and then it was my dad's pocket knife, and now it's mine. Now, it did not look like this when it, arrived in my hands. This is a very, very old pocket knife. It is a Camillus. It says Camillus, New York, and then the number here is 70. This has been completely restored by some awesome people in the community. I had lost the rear scale. They did their best to replace it. I think it looks cool. I kind of like that it's got two different, things of wood on it. Actually, this might be bone. I'm not sure. Anyways, this was my first knife. And I found this at my grandma's house while I was over there, doing whatever I wanted, because there were no rules at grandma's house. You could jump on beds. You could, run around with toy guns that looked like real guns, because that's just how they looked back then. I ate whatever I want. It was chocolate and ice cream and running around and all this stuff. I found this pocket knife in one of the drawers at her house, and I said, "Can I have this?" And she goes, "Sure." And that was that. I think I was 9 years old. She said, "Sure. Go ahead, run around with it with the blades out." I remember running around in her basement with the blades out like this and my fist between it, like pretending that I was Knuckles from Sonic the Hedgehog. Unbelievably dangerous, but that's how she was like, whatever, what's the worst that could happen? My dad, I came home, I was like, "Grandma gave me a pocket knife," and he was like, "What?" And he was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. And I can't remember if he took it from me then and then gave it back and then had to take it again, or if, I think what happened was he was like, "Okay, this is a tool. You don't bring this to school. You don't use it as a weapon." And he gave me some examples of always cut away from yourself. It's a non-locking blade, so don't try to stab it into stuff. And you don't throw it or anything like that. And he sort of kind of walked me through some examples of things that we would use a pocket knife for. And he said, "You need to have a good place to keep it." My dad did all the right stuff. He did all the right stuff. The problem is that when no one was looking, I was a kid. I was 9. So I'm like, as soon as no one's looking, I'm going to. The only thing that I remember thinking, my dad was trying to teach me stuff, and I was like, if I open that up with all of the blades out, it's like a ninja star. If I throw it like this, it'll stick pretty much no matter what in anything. I wasn't paying attention. And my parents had just bought a new refrigerator, and the box was in the garage, and we always took those big boxes and cut windows and made little forts until that we destroyed it. But I was like, I'm going to set that box up against the swing set, and I'm going to throw it. So he goes back inside, and I am throwing this and sticking it in the cardboard, and he comes out, and he was like, "This is exactly what I told you not to do." Took it away, and eventually gave it back to me, I think a year later or so. I think I was 10, and I had a completely different respect for the knife. Now, this is a non-locking knife, and back then, this would have been 1997. Obviously, there were locking blades. My dad was in no rush to go and get me an optimized tool. He was like, "This is it. This is what you have. Figured out." I cut myself with this thing about 70 bajillion times. Most of them were minor. There were definitely times where I cut into my finger to the point where it was gushing. And it just took a really long time for me to learn. There are certain things that you just cannot do with a slip joint. And I think slip joints are fine. I think that a lot of people that will only carry knives like that, and you just that's just how you learn, right? But this knife taught me, as much as I love this knife, there's a ton of sentimental value to it. It taught me this is not the optimized thing for me. I also consider slip joints to be some of the least safe knives out there. So why am I telling you this? Everybody gets their first knife at a different stage in their life. My son is going to be 10. And as a parent, and also a ridiculous knife nut, I want him to have a pocket knife. I also want to teach him at a young age, like do's and don'ts with pocket knives. And this is stuff that I've been talking about with him for probably 3 years now. I have relentlessly pointed out and showed, given my son examples like, well, I'm using a knife. This is what we use a knife for. These are the different types. And, he comes in and he looks at stuff in here and he has been begging and begging and begging. Can I please have a pocket knife? And my wife and I have talked about this many times. She wants to wait a little bit longer. And either way, we are approaching. I've told her, I was like, he needs to have a first knife because it's important for kids to learn this stuff. If you don't teach everybody, by the way, I'm not about to sit here and tell you how to be a parent. If your opinion is my kids will never have a pocket knife, they'll never know about them, and I just don't want them to know about, I think that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to tell anybody how to parent. I'm just going to share with you my thoughts about knives and my son and when he's going to get his first knife and what I think is a good idea and a bad idea for him, for us. I think it's case by case. Nobody knows your kid better than you, and your opinion there is really the only one that counts, right? So don't take this as me telling you how you should go about this, because I've given this a lot of thought. I mean, I've been thinking about this since he was born. It's like the day after he was born, I was like, I wonder what his first knife should be, So I've gone back and forth on this, but I want to choose something that I think is right for him based on everything that has gone wrong with me and knives. And I want to share with you what I think about, certain knives and good or bad choices. For an adult, and somebody who is vaguely already familiar with knives, like let's say we're talking about someone who's in their mid-20s. And they've always kind of just carried around junk knives. And all of a sudden, maybe they stumble upon my channel or other channels like it, and they're exposed to this whole world, this whole enthusiast world. And these people are, oh my God, these people get really into this, and all the pros and cons. What's this brand? I've never even heard of this brand. There's different types of steel. There's balance. I thought a knife was just a knife, right? And then they learn, no, there's these ladders and tier lists and all this. So then that person getting their first good knife, right? Look at the table. All of these, the Ozark Trail's out here because we kind of got it. This is, by the way, the Ozark Trail knife, whatever this is, the orange crossbar lock in D2. This is if you're on a super crazy ultra budget, you're I got $15. I literally don't have more than that. I would say save and spend at least 30 on a knife. But if you're just you need a knife right now and you got no more than $15, okay, fine. I'm not saying that I think that the Ozark Trail is a one and done. I truly believe that you just save however long it takes. You just save, right? But if you have to, okay, fine. Everything else, say for my first knife, I think any of these are great choices for that person, that adult person who has already gone through the dumb kid phase with the first knife and you cut yourself or poke yourself a million times and you learn all these things that you do or don't. I would like to prevent as much of that as possible. I don't love the idea of, well, sometimes you just have to slice the absolute bejesus out of yourself to learn. Yeah, okay. That'll do it. But I also, if I can prevent that, as much of that as possible. Because I look at my kids, my two older ones now, and I'm they take way less risks. When I was a kid, it was a miracle that I lived. The number of things that I did, I was because I figured out how to climb up on my roof. And I was I'm pretty sure if I take an umbrella up there, I'd been playing Kirby on NES. I was I'm pretty sure if I jump off my roof with an umbrella, I'd float down. I bet I could float all the way across this big open field behind my house. I did. I climbed up there with an umbrella and I jumped off and I just hit the ground. It was awful. Knocked the wind out of my knees, went into my chest. umbrella just immediately like. That's the kind of stuff that I did. Or I'd build I'd like a dirt ramp. I'd just like get a shovel and like dig a hole in the middle of my yard and go and make a pile. And then I would ride my bike as fast as I possibly could, thinking I was going to get like, and I'd crash into it and flip it. This is the kind of stuff that I did. And like the number of times that stuff like this had to happen before I was like, I should probably stop doing that. I mean, it was all the way into like mid high school. Like I remember being like 15 and I was like, everything that they're doing on Jackass is hilarious. I want to do that. I took a giant, like, commercial sized trash can out in my backyard and turned it upside down and stood on it and had my friend run the camera, and I had my other friend run at me with a pillow and hit me at my feet so that I like toppled sideways. I never thought about the outcome. I was like, this will look hilarious on camera. It actually there's lost media somewhere where it's literally our senior, or my friend's senior video, and I contributed to it as a junior in high school. So this would have been I would have been like 17. But that was the senior video, was basically just our Jackass compilation. It was ridiculous. I don't know what happened to it. It's gone. But these are the kinds of decisions that I made. And it took me a long time to just like stop doing things like that. Now, my kids definitely, they do things that they shouldn't do when I'm not looking, but nowhere near as risky. And I like that. I like that my kids think a little bit. I constantly say, if you leave that like that, if you leave that right there, think about what could happen, right? For the next person. Think about the next person, right? Think about what you're doing. Look at what you're doing right now and consider like what could potentially go wrong. I constantly do this. And it's because I was so stupid and destructive as a kid. And I made so many absolutely ridiculous. I didn't drink or do drugs or anything as a kid, but I made so many bad choices that I could have easily been catastrophically injured or died, right? And I did a lot of this. Sometimes I would do this stuff like in the middle of nowhere, like down like by a dry creek bed, like, and nobody, if I got, hurt, like no one would know where I was. Like I think back to this and I'm like, oh my God, it's just crazy. My kids are not presented with those opportunities. And I also work here at home. They're never somewhere where I don't know where they are. And that's part of just like living in the world that we live in now. I think it's a lot more like I don't know that there's a lot of like on a Saturday morning, like you just leave with your friends on your bike and then you don't come home till the sun goes down. I don't know that that's like really that did happen a lot in the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s. I think it doesn't happen nearly as much now, right? And so, anyways, I think my son, especially my son, he thinks a lot about everything that he does, right? So I think the likeliness of him doing stupid or destructive things with knives, or a knife if I gave it to him, it's much less likely. That being said, I seek to prevent as much as I can. And I do think that it is important that you every now and then, whoops, accidentally nicked myself there. That is how you learn, right? Now, I still do that, right? So you never really reach the end of that. You just, you remind yourself like, this is why we have to be careful with this stuff, right? A lot of great options out here for somebody who's not a kid, choosing, who's not a kid having their first knife chosen for them. I do not like the idea of taking my son to a store or showing him on a retail site and just pick whatever you want. I am not a fan of that. I'm going to choose for him. I'm not going to let him choose. I also do not like the idea of choosing something incredibly inexpensive just because he'll probably lose it. I think that's something that people will bring up. Don't give him a nice knife because he's probably going to lose it. I want to give him a nice knife. I have, in my personal scenario is that I have, 800 knives at my disposal. Right? I don't love the idea of him losing a really nice knife, but if it happens, it happens. I don't love that. I also, I'm not going to say, hey, bud, no big deal if you lose this, because dad's got a bajillion of them, right? And he gets a lot of stuff for free. Not going to tell him that. No. I want to get him a nicer knife because the nicer knives tend to be a little bit safer. I also want to get a specific version of a nicer knife that is incredibly safe while still allowing him to learn about using the thing as a tool, right? So I don't like the idea of a cheap knife. Obviously, I want something that locks. So a slip joint is just immediately out. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people. So I grew up with slip joint knives. I think that's like the best knife to learn. That's why they used to give Boy Scouts. You can give me all that stuff. I disagree. I don't think that I want to give my son a slip joint. I think it's fine if you give your kids a slip joint or a cheap knife or whatever. I think if anything that I veto out of this, if you would choose those things, I think that's perfectly fine because everybody's going to have their own reasoning. I don't like the idea of my son having to manipulate a locking system that requires him to put his fingers in the path of the blade. I think that down the road, learning how to manipulate these systems, because they'll still be prominent, things like liner locks, they're going to be around for a long time. Learning how to do this, right? Learning how to manipulate a knife with one hand, right? I think that's more of like a if he chooses to kind of thing. You don't necessarily have to always manipulate it. But if I can give him a knife where there's never a time when you're disengaging the lock and having to close it, a liner lock, you have to put your fingers there, right? These are great knives. These are great. I don't want him to have to mess with that. I don't want his fingers in the way of the blade as it comes down, right? So Ontario Rat, great choice for, I think, maybe somebody who's more familiar with knives. But yeah, I don't want to do that. Crossbar locks. I think crossbar locks are pretty good. His hands are smaller than mine. So while like the Kershaw, like this is the Vacor, the Migron Vacor is an awesome $45 knife. And the Kershaw Bel Air, also really great. I don't know what it is about crossbar locks, but anybody who has had a lot of crossbar locks, or you remember getting your first crossbar lock, there's something about the way that you have to hold these things, pull back a bit. There's something about it that feels very foreign. And even to this day, it doesn't feel foreign anymore, but even to this day, I feel like for some reason, crossbar locking knives, I always find a way to accidentally nick myself. Like, I'm not paying attention, I go to do this, and I pull back, and then because of where my fingers are, like, I get myself, I nick. I mean, like, it happens on an odd amount. The other thing is I don't want him to be in a situation where the Omega spring breaks, and he's like, what do I do? You know? So I think they're fine. I don't know why I tend to still nick myself with these, even though you shouldn't be in a situation where your fingers are in the way, right? I don't think a crossbar lock is the right choice, right? So like Hogue Deca and Benchmade Bug Out are out. And also the Beef. The Beef is out too. Love this knife. The Flytanium Beef, such a great budget knife. Absolutely wonderful. Highly recommendable, but not the one that I want for my son. So we're getting down to like some real, like these are some super winners here. Not every single great knife in existence is out here on this table. But like if you were to, the Penguin's still in there. It's the liner lock. Penguin's a great knife. Great first knife for a lot of people who are already, fairly familiar with pocket knives, right? Not the one I want to give him. We're getting to some really great choices like the Vision FG with the super lock, right? Other knives that kind of operate that same way. Your Demco Shark Cub and your Demco AD 20.5. This is my current, this and the Spyderco Sage 6 are currently two of my favorite EDC knives ever. These are great. For his hands, I've watched him try to manipulate this. A lot of this has come, something I should have said earlier on, is over the years, every now and then he'll be like, can I try? And I'll hand it to him and I'll say, before you do this, you have to understand, you have to constantly be aware that this edge of the blade is sharp. So if you make a movement, you go to move or manipulate this in some way and you run your finger or your part of your hand against that blade, you're probably going to cut yourself. So we have to, actively respect the fact that this is a sharp edge. It is dangerous, right? It's unlikely that you will catastrophically injure yourself, but it is always possible. And the more careless you are with this object, the more likely you are to cut yourself. We want to do everything that we can to avoid cutting ourselves or anybody else, right? Being around other people is another thing that is that's very that's something that's very serious, and it's something that I will have to constantly remind him of when he actually does get his knife. Don't whip this out and cut. Like, if you're only concerned with yourself and there's lots of other people around, well, then you could very easily cut somebody else. But anyways, I don't want to get too far into the weeds of that. I've watched him try to manipulate knives like the Super Lock and the 80 20.5. Even adults. You ever handed your 80 20.5 off to like a fully grown man with strong hands? This is what they do. They're just not pulling it back far enough. We know you got to pull that back all the way. But like my dad, for example, he'll go, right? My son's hands are just simply not quite strong enough to do that efficiently. So this is great. Also, reminding yourself to not put your fingers in the way, right? I mean, that's something that I've seen people do. So these knives, like, super great, super dependable. Again, I think for somebody who's much more familiar with knives. Spyderco compression lock, not necessarily the same thing, but because of the way that you have to hold the knife while you push the compression lock in, it's just a lot of things. Like, this is very natural to me, and I love Spyderco knives. It's super natural to me. But I think that there's a lot going on here that I'm not thinking about, that he would have to think about. And it would cause him to forget if his fingers were in the way, right? The other thing is that some of these like Spyderco knives, like the PM2 and Pair 3, have needle-like tips. This is something I haven't really brought up a lot. I don't like the idea of his first blade shape being a drop point, a clip point. There will be times where he forgets not to walk or run with a knife like this. Or it's just like possible, right? It's just like, because you can't prevent everything. You can't stop no amount of reminding, right? It's like the whole don't run with scissors things. Well, also don't run with pencils. Like, I have to tell my kids, don't run with a pencil straight up, right? Or anything sharp, a fork, or, obviously a knife, anything like that. Like, let's not run with this stuff in general, but think about it. Think about the thing. All it takes is for you to trip over something and it goes right into your eye or your chest or your stomach. I mean, like, or into somebody else. We hand things off, like when we do the dishes, I always say, if you're going to hand something, if they're tag teaming the dishes, if you're going to hand a knife to your sister, or, you're going to hand a knife to your brother, the handle, the blade should be down, right? And you should make sure that you are cognizant, you're paying attention, and you're handing it off to him, and he's looking, and he's got a grip on it before you let go, right? You don't hand a knife to somebody like this. That's just crazy. Don't like the idea of a drop point. And again, I know some people, that's how they learn, though. Yeah, I prefer that my kid didn't learn by a blade like this, like, stuck in his... I don't want that to even be a remote possibility, right? If you'd say, oh, your odds are 20,000 to 1, 1 in 20,000, I'd be like, it's too... The odds aren't in his or my favor enough. It needs to be like 1 in a trillion. I'm being ridiculous about this, but that's why. Don't want that blade shape. Compression lock out. The button operated compression lock is a pretty good choice. This is a pretty good choice. I like this. Especially something like the raccoon with the blade. It's not quite, it's sharp at the tip. Like the Sage, it's a little bit, still a little too pointy, but like the way that you hold it, I've seen him operate these. You push the button and it moves that out of the way. This is pretty good. Pretty good, right? But there is a better choice. There's an obvious better choice, and it's something that I have talked about so many times on this channel. I guess it's not really obvious. It might be obvious to some of you, but I don't think it's obvious. It's definitely not obvious to the average person. The average person would say this is the last knife that the last type of knife I would ever recommend for a kid, because they're dangerous, right? OTF. You can't be serious. His first pocket knife would be an OTF? Yeah, and specifically this one, the EMP EDC Pulse, the USA-made Pulse with 6364 Magna Cut. There are downsides to this. Number one, this is a nice knife. This is a $280 knife if you can find it. You know, people right off the bat, your kid's first knife is going to be a $280 switchblade. Yes, this is a knife. I'm sorry, this is a knife, obviously. This is a nice knife. It's a very well-made knife, right? If he loses it, that would suck. That is a possibility. I've let my son have sort of a trial run with a watch. He has a nice watch. He has my old steel G-Shock. And I know that a lot of people would say that isn't a crazy watch to give a kid. I like the fact that he has that watch because, and I promise I'm going somewhere with this. I like that he has that watch. Number one, it's durable. It's a very durable watch. I'm not worried at all that anything's going to really happen to it, even if he's a little rough with it. Number two, it's solar powered. It just runs all the time, and it constantly corrects itself when it's in the vicinity of my phone because of the Bluetooth application, right? It's digital. He can read time, read time. He can tell time on a regular clock, a digital clock. I'm not like super worried about him getting lazy looking at a digital. Like he can already tell time, right? He does it every day in school, all day, all through every class. He knows exactly what time it is because he's constantly paying attention to that clock, right? And so he's got lots of practice staring at that regular non-digital clock. But it's plenty durable. It goes with a ton of different outfits, right? And it has taught him to be aware of where it is at all time. He's constantly aware of where he puts it down. He has a couple of times misplaced it and he has panicked and he's cried and then he finds it. And I said, you got to have a specific place for this. And it's been a year and a half since he has misplaced that watch because it's either on his wrist or it's in his little bedside drawer in its case. I gave him a little watch case and he keeps it there. And he doesn't get it out unless it's not something that he's allowed to wear to school because number one, it'd be super distracting, right? Number two, other kids and, you never know, it's not something he takes to school. Like you can wear it to church, you can wear it to, when we go out to dinner, you can wear it like around your cousins, stuff like that is fine. But it goes back to the case. He's done such a good job, especially as he's gotten older, about being responsible with that watch. And that was kind of like the trial thing. Like if you can go multiple years with a nice watch, right, and prove that you will not misplace it, then maybe we move on to another thing, right? And I understand that this, again, I have to beat this down. Like, I understand that this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous that my son's first watch was a steel G-Shock, and that's fine, right? But it's my circumstance, my kids. So in this case, he passed the test. He has a nice watch, and he has kept track of it, and it's been fine. It's ridiculous that I would let him have a super, super nice pocket knife for his first pocket knife, because what if he loses it, right? Okay, that's fine. My thing is the fact that it is expensive is just kind of like, that's just what it ended up being. I'm sure that there are some other like inexpensive OTF knives that I could buy that are essentially the same thing here. And because I'm going to talk about why this specific OTF, and that would cost less, maybe, but I have this one already and I don't mind, if this ends up being his. Number one, the blade is never in a position where where his hands are, like he's never going to be holding it like this. He's going to be holding it like this, in and out. I've said this a million times. OTFs are some of the safest knives on the planet. It requires deliberate force. This is not a left and right switch with minimum force. You have to overcome tension. People thinking that this is going to go off in your pocket, it's not. You have to overcome the tension. That switch is trying to snap back into the closed position. You push it forward, overcome it, the blade deploys. Your hands are never in the way of the blade. When it retracts or deploys, your hands are completely out of the way. It's super safe. This particular OTF, he can actually manipulate. I have a Maxace Neptune. Super cool. Don't love, for his first knife, number one, real dangerous, like freaking spear point, double edge. Like, no, I don't think. But he also cannot deploy this. A lot of my other OTFs he can't do. This one, yeah, he can do it, no problem. I like that it's got grip texture. Pocket clip's good. mainly, I think this is the absolute ideal blade shape for him. If he's running with it, which he should never do, but if he does, this would be far less likely to do fall damage, right? Just, you're also less likely to, because it doesn't have, like, you know, like a real blade tip, way less likely he's going to accidentally, like, puncture himself, you know? He might get a little poke, right? Not incredibly slicey, it's just a straight edge, but it's like a long utility blade. This, I think, is the perfect blade to teach him that knives are tools of convenience, right? I don't want to teach him about using it as a weapon. Obviously, you know, it's like you get into a situation, you use what you have. It's your primary objective should be to leave, get away from the situation. Your primary objective should not be defeat the bad guys with all your YouTube ninja skills. Like, no. I would say you get out, just run, like get out of there. You know, don't be thinking about what you're going to do with your knife because the knife could easily be taken away and used against you, right? I'm not really going to get too into that, right? But I think that this blade, and also the fact that it's stainless and magna cut, right? This is going to get to, at first he's going to baby it. It's going to be like his special, you know, not going to want to use it. Eventually though, he's just going to start using it. It's magna cut. 63, 64 HRC, it's going to be a blade that's going to stay sharp for a long time. It's stainless, incredibly stainless, and very tough. If I have to touch this back up for him or resharpen it, I will be able to do it very easily. Is there a possibility that he will get it gunked up because he starts to sort of not really pay attention to what he's using? Like maybe he goes out and uses it in the dirt and a bunch of dirt gets in there, you know? Yeah, it could be that at some point, it gets gunked up and then it won't work correctly. In which case, I'm his dad, so I will take it apart and, you know, say this is why we can't do that, right? Add some more ram oil, stuff like that. So yeah, there are pros and cons for sure. But this fits his hand. It's got jimping back here. I think it's incredibly safe. I think this is just like the absolute ideal pocket knife. He can get it in and out of his pocket easily. Lightweight, compact. Also, you know, like my dad told me, he said, when I got you your first vehicle, I got you a truck on purpose. That way, you know, it's like, he's like, I got another work truck in my fleet because he had like 6 work trucks. He's like, when you drive a truck, I can also use your bed when I need it. I'm kind of thinking the same way with the pocket knife. If I, for some reason, need a pocket knife and I don't have mine, if he's got his, this is a knife that I, you know, can use and it would be pretty efficient. This is a pocket knife that does not specialize in anything in particular. It's just good at common tasks. A lot of people would say, well, OTFs have super weak locking systems, so that's not a good idea. They actually don't. Cheap OTFs have really, really weak locking systems. Expensive OTFs actually have really strong locking systems. I do not plan to teach my son that a knife can be a pry bar, a screwdriver, a hammer, any of that. I plan on teaching my son, if you want all that stuff on one tool, you get a multi-tool. You don't force your cutting tool into all of those different roles. That's ridiculous. And adults should know that too. Multi-tools exist, so your knife doesn't need to be all of those things. Your knife should just be a knife. If your knife is all those things, it stops being a cutting tool because then it's just a dull piece of metal that's not good at anything. So if you want all those things, you get a multi-tool. If you want a knife, use it as a knife. So he's not going to be using it that way. This is reliable, snappy. I've never seen this thing fail. I think I've deployed it 500 times. It's got a nice stone washing on it. It'll get beat up over time, but I fully believe that this will be a knife that he can depend on for a long time, right? I don't know that there's any way for him not to eventually end up like a little bit like me, where he likes to collect pocket knives, and ultimately my entire collection will go to my kids at some point. So he's going to end up with a ton of them anyway. But I think that I think I'd be comfortable with this. My wife is not. We're not 100%. It has to be my wife and I both agree on it, and we're both on board, right? I can't be like, well, just give it to him behind her back. I'm not going to do that. I want my wife to, you know, We both have to agree like this is the right time. So I don't know that it'll be this year for Christmas or next year. It might be when he's 11 or so, but we both, have talked about this, and it's like we both have to agree that it's the right time. So, but yeah, I think so. And then obviously what comes after that is I am looking for situations where I'm like, here's a good opportunity for you to use your knife in a proper way, and then sort of go through the steps together and talk about all the things that are important, like cutting away and making sure and being aware if there's other people around you, because knives can get caught and slip, and you have to be aware. You have to tell people, I have a knife, stand back a little bit. I always do that. I don't know if you guys do that. When my kids are around, I say, guys, I have a knife. I need you to move back just a little bit in case I slip, little things like that. There's a million little things. There's a lot of good choices. There's a ton of good choices. I think anything that was out on the table, if somebody else would have chosen that instead of this, I think those are all good choices, and a million other things, right? A utility, like a box cutter, a lot of people say this. Fine. Whatever your choice would be, I think is fine. I don't think there's any perfect answer. There's not necessarily a wrong answer to this. Actually, there is. Your kid's first knife should not be a ballistic knife. Or sword. But outside of that, any pocket knife, I think is fine. We've been talking about this for 36 minutes. It's a long episode, but a fun one. And I think it's one of those that sparks a lot of discussion, right? So, anyways, that's going to be it. You can tell me about my choice, whether or not you think it's a good choice. You let me know. Down in the comments section and tell me what you would choose. That's going to be it for today, though. So please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. If you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.